object in life was to be Diana. That has always been her passion.
Object in life was to be Diana. That has always been her passion, and her idea of elegance has flown me to the nth degree. 0:13:13 seconds the obvious reality that my sister wasn't around anymore, and I wanted to speak for music, her honestly and truly and fully. And that was it really. 0:22:22 seconds, that's all I tried to do. 0:23:23 seconds, 30 years of silence, not a single interview, not a memoir. In fact, in the 0:30:30 seconds final paragraph, I'd run out of energy and almost out of oxygen. I know it sounds rather overdramatic, but not a memoir, not one public comment on the nephew he raised up in his arms at Westminster Abbey, or the woman that nephew married. 30 years in which the entire planet dissected, dramatized, and monetized his sister. 0:52:52 seconds a home of some sort can always get better. I was almost an embarrassment. 0:57:57 seconds while he stood behind a locked gate in Northamptonshire and said nothing. Then a courier arrived at Althorpe with a 1:041 for seconds proposal, and Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, the man who has guarded Diana's private world with an almost monastic discipline, finally had something to say. 1:151 15 seconds, wonderful person, we just lost. And if in music, in comparison to that, other people felt badly about it, well, that was really not my issue. I was music trying to just be loyal to Diamond. 1:271 27 seconds. His answer, according to recent reporting, was a flat, unambiguous refusal. No negotiation, no counteroffer, no let's talk, just no. And in a man defined by silence, that single word hit the royal world like a thunderclap. 1:431 43 seconds. Within days, royal experts were dissecting what it meant. Because this was not simply a documentary deal falling through. This was something far more loaded. This was the last blood guardian of Diana's memory. 1:561 56 seconds. The princess who spent her life in a relentless flare of public eye died in a speeding car in Paris, apparently trying to evade pursuing photography, drawing a line publicly unmistakably between what his sister's legacy truly was and what it was being turned into. And the people it affected most were not the palace. 2:182 18 seconds. They were Harry and Meghan in their Montecito home, watching the rescue flare they had sent up come right back down in flames. Stay with me, because this story moves through time, through grief, through jewelry, through a confession, and through one of the most closely guarded private archives in the modern royal era. And by the end of it, you will understand why the man who never speaks just delivered the loudest verdict of the Sussex saga, the man who disappeared. 2:472 47 seconds. To understand what Charles Spencer did with that proposal, you first, music, have to understand what kind of man was holding it. Most people who know the name Charles Spencer know exactly one moment. The 6th of September, music, 1997, Westminster Abbey. A global television audience of roughly 2 billion people. 3:083 8 seconds. A young man in a dark suit at a lectern. 3:103 10 seconds. His voice controlled, but his eyes carrying something raw, something that had no business being restrained. And then the words came. He spoke about his sister as a very British girl. He spoke about her laughter, her naturalness, the genuine quality of her compassion, and then he made the promise, the one that echoed out through the nave, pulled applause in from the streets outside, and stopped every person in that building cold. He promised that Diana's sons would be shielded from the cold, dysfunctional machinery that had chewed their mother apart. He promised that her blood family, the Spencers, would never allow the institution to swallow them the way it had swallowed her. He said it directly from that lectern to the Queen's face, to Prince Philip's face, to the future king sitting just a music few feet away. He didn't flinch once, and then he walked back to Althorpe and for the most part disappeared. That is the foundation. That long, deliberate, almost eerie invisibility is music, exactly what gives his recent actions such extraordinary weight. We live in a media culture built entirely around Diana's image. Her face appears on magazine covers, on stamps, on memorial merchandise, on streaming thumbnails. She is one of the most commercially reproduced figures in the history of celebrity. And through all of it, Charles Spencer has never once opened the vault, never sold the archive, never given the interview that cracks even an inch of it open, never licensed the grounds at Althorpe for anything beyond what he felt was appropriate. The world has had decades to wonder what is in that archive. Handwritten diaries, home movies, privately taken photographs from her childhood, from ordinary family days that were never meant to be extraordinary. The raw, unguarded Diana, the one that exists in no documentary, no biography, no Netflix series. That woman is still private. She survives only because one man kept saying no. What makes that music discipline genuinely remarkable and genuinely rare is that the financial incentives to do the opposite have never been small. The offers, by all accounts, have been consistent, lavish, and presented by people skilled at making compromise feel like wisdom. Publishers, broadcasters, streaming giants with nine-figure content budgets, and teams of producers who specialize in making the unthinkable feel reasonable. Music, the pitch, is always some version of the same thing. The world deserves to know her properly. You can control how it's done. You can shape the narrative. Better you than someone who gets it wrong. And Charles Spencer, for 30 years, has responded to every version of that argument with the same answer. He does not need the money. He does not need the profile. And he does not believe the world's desire to consume Diana is the same thing as the world's right to consume her. That is a distinction almost no one else in this story has been willing to make. Music, and it is the distinction that defines everything he has done since that abbey. So the real question, the question royal experts have been sitting with, is what was in that proposal that made him say no so, music loudly that the world heard it, and who sent it? It began the way so many things in this family begin, with something small, beautiful, music, and apparently innocent. The royal wedding. May 2018. The evening reception. Meghan Markle arrived wearing Diana's aquamarine ring. That distinctive pale blue stone. Music, recognizable to anyone who had ever followed Diana's story. From where Charles Spencer sat watching, it likely felt tender. Someone new, someone his nephew clearly adored. Choosing to carry Diana into the biggest night of her life. It felt like remembrance. It may even have felt like family. But then came the butterfly earrings, then the Cartier watch, then the gold bracelets. Piece by piece, item by item. Each belonging that had once been Diana's surfaced on Meghan at precisely the moments where a photograph was not just likely, but absolutely guaranteed. Major public events, choreographed arrivals, maximum lens coverage. Music now, and this needs to be said clearly, no one can prove the intention was anything other than genuine tribute. Grief is complicated, and Meghan had married into one of the most emotionally complex families in history. Wearing your late mother-in-law's jewelry is not evidence of strategy. It is on its own a perfectly human thing to do. But music, with a harder question. When does tribute become a pattern? When does pattern start to look like a deliberate choice? Once is tribute, twice is habit. Every single time, at precisely the moments designed for maximum camera coverage, starts to look like something else entirely. And the man at Althorpe was paying attention. He was cataloging every frame because these items were not just jewelry. They were pieces of Diana's story, and they were being placed in someone else's narrative without a single conversation with the person who holds the originals. It is worth pausing on what those items actually represent in the context of Charles Spencer's guardianship. Diana's jewelry was not simply personal property passed to Harry. It was, and music, remains in the minds of those closest to her, a physical extension of the woman herself. These were objects she chose, touched, wore on her most significant days. They carry a kind of biographical weight that transcends their material value. And when they begin appearing in a carefully managed visual campaign styled for photos, timed to announcements, placed against California light for maximum warmth and impact, the person watching from Althorpe is not seeing grief. He is seeing inventory. He is seeing someone else's assets being converted into someone else's brand, without so much as a music phone call to the estate. Keep that thought, because the jewelry was only the opening act. Oprah Echo, March 2021. The Oprah interview. The entire planet watched it. Music, but picture it the way Charles Spencer reportedly watched it. From the same house where Diana grew up, from the rooms where he and his sister ran as children. The setting was golden and intimate, low light, soft furnishings. Music, the architecture of confession rather than confrontation. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one institution that had, she said, silenced her, dismissed her suffering, and left her isolated with nowhere to turn except directly to the public. If you know your royal history, the recognition hit you immediately, because that is almost beam for beam the structure of Diana's 1995 Panorama interview. Here is why that matters so profoundly. A royal wife isolated inside the institution speaking of a palace apparatus that was deaf to her pain. Every internal door closed, so she goes over its head straight to the nation through a single trusted interviewer. The lighting rhymes. The casting rhymes. The grammar of victimhood rhymes. The setting, the tone, the emotional arc, all of it rhymes, except for one critical difference, and it is the most telling detail, music, in the entire comparison. Diana gave her 1995 interview while she was still trapped, still inside the system. No exit in sight, no resources beyond what the institution allowed, everything music to lose. That interview was a genuine cry from inside a locked room. The 2021 version was filmed from a villa in California. After the exit, with a production apparatus already in motion, a streaming empire already in development, a brand already taking shape, the original was distress. The remake, whatever else you believe about it, was a launch. And watching it from the Althorpe sitting room, Charles Spencer did not experience that hour as tribute, but to understand why it cut him so deeply, why it crossed a line that the jewelry had only approached. You have to know a secret about this man. One that most mainstream royal coverage never touches. The secret guilt. This is the part of the story that changes everything. By long-standing, well-documented accounts. It was Charles Spencer himself who first brought his sister into contact with Martin Basher, the journalist behind the 1995 Panorama interview. He believed music he was doing something helpful. He had been shown documents, bank statements as far as he knew, music evidence. He had been told that people close to Diana were secretly being paid to spy on her, that she was surrounded by informants, that those she trusted most were being financially rewarded to betray her. He opened the door, and we now know through a formal inquiry led by Lord Dyson, a former Supreme Court justice, exactly how those documents were obtained. They were forgeries, music fabricated from scratch. Fake bank statements designed to convince a frightened, isolated woman that everyone around her was an enemy. That her only safe move, music, was to sit in front of a camera and bleed for the nation. Diana's vulnerability in that interview was not a side effect of the broadcast. Her vulnerability was the product. The manufactured distress was the point. And her younger brother, music, deceived by the same fake documents, had unknowingly held the door open. The inquiry found that the forgeries, music, had induced him into arranging the meeting. The BBC's Director General issued a personal apology to him directly. Think about what that does to a person. You spend your entire adult life believing you are your sister's protector. You stand in Westminster Abbey and tell 2 billion people that you will shield her sons. You carry that vow as the defining act of your life. Music, and then decades later, you discover that the single most psychologically damaging media event of her existence, the interview that exposed her innermost pain to a global audience that consumed it like entertainment, walked in through a door you were tricked into. Opening by every account, music, everything Charles Spencer has done since, is an act of quiet, relentless atonement. The sealed archive, the year after year refusals, the decision to bury Diana on the island at Althorpe rather than surrender her to any institution, the home movies that no one outside the family has seen, the handwritten diaries that no one outside the family has read. He has been making absolutely certain that nothing like Panorama can ever happen to Diana again. Not in life, she is gone. Not in death, not now. Not ever. And in doing that, he achieved something almost no famous figure in the modern era has managed. He protected her mystery. There is a real Diana, unguarded, fully human private, that the world never got to consume. She survives only because one man kept saying, music, no. Even as the whole world kept asking. The weight of that achievement is genuinely difficult to overstate. In an era where every private correspondence music eventually surfaces, where estates are monetized by executors, where children sell their parents' letters and siblings sell their siblings' secrets, Charles Spencer has maintained a cordon of privacy around his sister that has held for nearly 3 decades. Biographers have tried, broadcasters have tried, publishers with very large checkbooks have tried. The answer is always the same. You would not find a comparable archive, music, this carefully protected, this long undisturbed, belonging to anyone of Diana's cultural magnitude anywhere in the world. She is in a meaningful sense the most famous person of her generation whose inner life remains genuinely unknown. And that is not an accident. That is a brother's work. So picture him sitting in his chair when a courier arrives with a proposal that wants all of it.
The pitch.
Let me lay out what that proposal reportedly contained. Because once you hear it in full, his response, music, stops looking like aristocratic stubbornness and starts looking like the only rational answer a man in his position could possibly give. The concept was a grand anniversary documentary for 2027, marking 30 years since Paris. Emotional, cinematic, intended to be definitive, fronted by Diana's own son. On paper, it sounds extraordinary. The project, music, the world has been waiting for. And by these accounts, Netflix responded to the idea with immediate enthusiasm. But here is what it reportedly required. It wanted Elthorpe itself, the childhood home, the grounds, the island where Charles Spencer, music, buried his sister, the private island in the lake that she specifically chose because it was beyond the reach of cameras and crowds and institutions. It wanted the private family archives, not the photographs that have already circulated, not the footage already in the public domain, the real archive, the one no one has seen. It reportedly wanted Diana's personal handwritten diaries, pages written only for herself, pages she never intended anyone outside her most trusted music circle to read. It wanted the home movies, the unguarded Diana, the private Diana, the laughing, ordinary human Diana that no documentary has ever touched. Without those, the documentary would be another recycled collection of footage that every Diana documentary since 1998 has already used. With them, it would be something entirely different. It would be the definitive portrait of the century. Music. And then there was one more element, the one that made the pitch magnetic to the people selling music it and utterly unthinkable to the man reading it. The documentary reportedly wanted to draw a direct explicit line between Diana's war with the institution and Meghan's. It wanted to position Meghan Markle as the modern continuation of Diana's story, the 21st-century version of the woman who refused to be silenced. Diana's halo formally transferred on camera with Diana's own family's blessing. Think about what Charles Spencer saw when he read that. He had watched the jewelry emerge piece by piece, each item timed to a guaranteed lens. He had watched the Oprah interview, the panorama architecture rebuilt brick by brick, filmed from a California villa with a streaming empire already in motion. He had watched a documentary series in which a couple fleeing the press framed themselves, music, as hunted by the same machinery that had destroyed Diana without a single phone call to Althorpe before filming began. And now they wanted the originals, the diaries, the island, the home movies, the halo fitted to a new head. According to the reporting, he shut it down completely, refused any access to the music archive. And here is the detail that royal watchers keep returning to. He did not call a press conference. He gave no interview. He released no statement. He did not say a word to a camera. He simply closed the door, and in closing it made his position unmistakable to everyone paying attention for a man who had guarded that silence for 30 years. The refusal, itself was the loudest thing he had ever said outside Westminster Abbey.